San Francisco 49ers 2024 training camp preview. It's time to get into the quarterbacks. We know who QB1 is. Did he get snubbed on the ESPN list, by the way? And competition at quarterback. QB2, QB3. Let's get into it on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker at BD Peacock at Crocky209. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We love our everydayers. Appreciate it when you hit that subscribe button. Please smash that subscribe on YouTube or wherever you are listening to this podcast. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first ticket purchase. Terms apply. Okay. There's only 4 players to talk about on the 49ers roster. We know which guy the 49ers want to take every snap of the season in Brock Purdy. So, and I think there's some opportunities there for some camp competitions with Joshua Dobbs, Brandon Allen, undrafted rookie free agent Tanner Mordecai. More on those guys. But ESPN today, Croc, dropped their list as voted on by coaches, anonymous coaches and execs around the NFL, ranking the top 10 quarterbacks in the league for 2024. Brock Purdy snubbed. He was an honorable mention, but not among the top 10. So I want to go through the list a little bit, and we'll find out if Brock Purdy deserved to be in front of any of these guys on the list of top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL for 2024. And the list starts with Patrick Mahomes, to nobody's surprise, I think. And I already start to have problems with the list, Croc, at number 2 and Joe Burrow. And it's not necessarily because Brock Purdy should be number 2, but I don't know how Joe Burrow is listed on here over Josh Allen, over Lamar Jackson especially.
Yeah, and I think with Joe Burrow, the biggest thing is probably his health. Because when he is like fully ready to go, he's clicking on all cylinders. He does play the football quarterbacking position at pretty much as high of a level as anybody. I mean, it's high level. There's nothing he can't do. He moves well, has good mobility, makes every throws. He's dialed in. I mean, we watched him against the 49ers, even in the year where he was kind of dealing with the calf injury, wasn't 100% healthy, had to play against the 49ers. At one point, he completed 20 straight passes. And you're thinking like, oh, man, this 49ers defense is just so terrible. And it's like, well, Joe Burrow's kind of good too, you know? So, he is a guy that if you're looking at it from the standpoint of he's healthy, he's ready to go, he's locked in, and obviously he has his weapons, there aren't many quarterbacks that play the quarterback position at a higher level than him.
Yeah.
And I would even say, even with like Josh Allen, I think Josh Allen's terrific. He might be like the best like combined freak in the NFL, but he does get a little sporadic with the ball at times. And I don't get that from Joe Burrow.
You would take Joe Burrow for 2024 over Josh Allen?
No, I was just giving their reasoning.
Okay. Joe Burrow should be 4 maybe, but I don't think he should be 2 or 3. I would have it as Mahomes, Allen, Lamar Jackson, then Joe Burrow. And here's the interesting thing.
Real quick, I feel like I trust Josh Allen. I mean, I trust Joe Burrow more than I trust Josh Allen, though.
In a one game, like, he's already healthy situation?
Yeah, like Josh Allen, he sometimes does these random things that I can't like. Oh, I'm not calling him Jimmy Garoppolo, but like Jimmy Garoppolo, you'd see him, he completes 70% of his passes. He do some good things. Obviously, he doesn't play nearly at the level of Josh Allen, but he would do those really
weird.
Huh?
The 30% he didn't complete were really weird sometimes.
Yeah, he just do some boneheaded stuff, and it's like,
yeah.
Jimmy, why did you do that? Like, what were you even thinking there? That interception in the division round playoff game against the Green Bay Packers in the end zone, in the red zone, it was like, why did you do that? Like, it's about to be halftime. You don't have to throw it. Like, you're able to get points. Like, why would you do that? Josh Allen does those things too. Like, he'll just turn the ball over, and it will be the most inexplicable turnover. But his highs are, I mean, it's him and Mahomes.
Right.
I just don't know if I'm going to get that.
And his highs, when you consider how he runs the ball too,
Yeah.
would be even ahead of Mahomes. He's the only guy you could probably really say about that. Obviously, Lamar Jackson's a different kind of a freak as a runner. And just because of the consistency there and the injuries for Burrow, I would put him just behind. And here's the interesting part about Burrow when you start comparing Brock Purdy to some of these guys, is Joe Burrow's not exceedingly huge, doesn't have a massive arm. Even though he's got a really good arm. He's pretty athletic, but it's not like he makes crazy plays with his legs any more than someone like Brock Purdy. And so if you are ranking someone like Joe Burrow on a list number 2 in the NFL, you're going a lot on vibes. And what I mean by vibes is the things that are maybe intangibles a little bit, right? And Brock Purdy ranks as high as anybody on those things and the intangibles. So if you're willing to put Joe Burrow at 2, you would think you'd be willing to rank Brock Purdy pretty darn high on the list after what he's done in the short time in the NFL. And he's never been bad in the NFL at all. And if you're going to put CJ Stroud on the list, which he's got even a smaller sample size than Brock Purdy. What's the deal, Croc? Why are you not putting Brock Purdy on the list then is what I would ask these execs. And the list gets really interesting, by the way, and I'll go through the top 10 real quick. After that, those top 4 that we mentioned, Lamar 4, Mathew Stafford is 5. Put a pin in that. Justin Herbert 6, CJ Stroud 7, Aaron Rodgers 8, Jared Goff 9, Dak Prescott 10. And so we had an argument, Croc, you and I, about Stafford and Purdy, and I said that Stafford's probably still a better quarterback than Brock Purdy. You push back on that a little bit. Stafford comes in 5 here on the list.
Well, okay, so again, the conversation, this is what I'm assuming that the execs and the coaches, and this is what I think they're doing. Are they saying if you had this is just for 1 year. We have a quarterback draft and it's for 1 year. And if that's the case, then it is hard to put Purdy over some of these guys. Like this is a talented, very talented group. But there are a couple of names that I feel like, even with that context, I would have Brock over. And I do think I would have him over CJ Stroud. I mean, we talked about CJ Stroud, some of the things that Stroud was able to do last year. When you talk about elevating the talent around him, is anybody checking for the Houston Texans? Was anybody saying, man, the Houston Texans, they got these star-studded receivers, they got all these guys. And opposite, right? Like, oh man, these guys are so bad. And Davis Mills, like, he has no help. And then you have no run game. It's like Damian Pierce and whatever. And he was willing his team to victories and then led them to the playoffs, like his rookie year. So but I would like to see it a little bit more, because now one thing that I've seen with Brock Purdy is a certain consistency level, right? Like now you could say, okay, the first year you only play half the games. League's gonna, quote unquote, if you're watching on YouTube, you see me doing the air quotes, they're gonna catch up to him or catch on to him and whatever. But all we've seen so far is most efficient quarterback. I would say that he has a more ideal situation than other people, and that's not to like super knock him. I think Joe Burrow has had an ideal situation as well, but he's probably had the most just weapons galore, great play caller. Your defense is typically near the top. Like, that's all he knows. And other people are like, man, I ain't have no run game. I have no defense. Like, I have to throw for 500 yards. Like, some of those games, Stroud has to throw for 500 yards. Like, has to. In the times that he's had to throw for 500 yards, he threw for 500 yards, and they won. And game-winning drive. So, it was special what he did, but I would like to see him do that. All right, you got to do it again before I can put you over Purdy, who I've seen play very well over a stretch of games as a rookie. Played awesome. And then the following year, still the most efficient quarterback in the NFL. So it's like, at the very least, I know exactly what he is. With Stroud, I think I know, and I do like it. Not quite sure if I could take him over Purdy. Matter of fact, I wouldn't right now. But like you said about Stafford, you can stick a pin in that.
If you include playoffs, probably about a year or a half a season more that Brock Purdy has played than CJ Stroud, I don't think that's enough of a sample size for me to take Purdy over Stroud. And actually, Stroud's one of the ones I don't have a problem with being over Brock Purdy because of how well he's played instantly in the NFL and elevated that talent on the Houston Texans, which was, top 2 worst teams in the NFL the year that he was drafted going into his rookie season. So a brand new coaching staff. I mean, pretty phenomenal what CJ Stroud has done, his physical ability. And I've kind of seen enough, right? And I've seen enough of Brock Purdy to feel good about where I'd rank him too. So, and it would be behind CJ Stroud. But there's some other names on the list, Croc, that I might have a little bit of a problem with Brock Purdy being ranked behind. We'll get into those next and talk a little bit about 49ers current group of quarterbacks where the training camp battles get a little bit interesting in 2024 next. This episode of Locked On 49ers is sponsored by BetterHelp Online Therapy. Comparison is the thief of joy. It's easy to envy other people's lives. And it's especially easy to envy other people's lives when their lives aren't even as good as they're projecting them to be on the gram, on social media. Might look like they have it all together in their curated photos. But in reality, you know what? They probably don't. And therapy can help you focus on what you want instead of what others have and start living your best life. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you got to do is fill out a brief questionnaire. You get matched with a licensed therapist, and then you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. So stop comparing and start focusing. Check in with the therapist weekly. Make sure you're hitting the goals you want to hit in your life with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today. Get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Okay, Croc. Stroud was at 7. Let me double check on the list. Okay, so here's the answer. So Stafford at 5. Are you okay with Stafford at 5? Herbert 6. Aaron Rodgers, I get he's a Hall of Fame quarterback. He's one of the all-time greats. Him being 8, if he's healthy, I totally understand him being on the list. So where I think it gets interesting is, and I don't have a problem
real quick, I take Brock Purdy over Aaron Rodgers.
For 2024?
Yeah, like he's coming off of an Achilles injury. He's old. He's aging. The last full season he played, it wasn't great. And you never know exactly how he's going to mesh with everyone else. Is he going to get in one of his little pissy attitudes? And, is he going to start pointing the finger, blaming everybody else? Is he locked in? Like, you don't know. And I love the career of Aaron Rodgers. But if you're telling me just, hey, you could take this quarterback or this quarterback, and it sounds crazy, but I like knowing a little bit more of what I'm going to get from a guy. And I don't know what version of Aaron Rodgers I'm going to get. I have no idea what version. We assume he's going to be great. We're not playing week 1. And maybe he looks like old Aaron Rodgers, and I'm like, hey, I was hella wrong. But I have no idea what version of him we're going to get.
I mean, it's a fascinating concept that Brock Purdy, a year and a half of Brock Purdy, you feel more confident in what you're going to get from that young player than Aaron Rodgers, who's been doing it for nearly 20 years.
Well, because again, the last full season I watched him, it was not great. And then he ruptured his Achilles. We're talking about new team. There's no Devontae Adams. It's getting on the same page with all these guys. Sometimes he can be a little different. How does that mesh with the guys? Do things start getting rocky, and then all of a sudden he's like disconnected emotionally from it because he has one foot out the door with retirement? Like there's just all these different dynamics. I don't think it's just as simple as just Aaron Rodgers, the football player, like that we've known. It's old Aaron Rodgers coming off of an injury, didn't have a great season the year before. There is no Devontae Adams. How much freedom do you have? I don't know what we're gonna get from him at all. But with Purdy, we've always gotten the same thing. Like it has, for the most part, and that's not to say that there hasn't been a weird game here and there, but for the most part, it has been the same since he stepped on. You can have questions after the first 8 starts, whatever that was. It has been exactly the same from there on out. Even if a guy goes down, I know, okay, might get a little weird, little moment, but for the most part, I know what I'm getting from Brock. And it's typically playing the quarterback position in the 49ers offense at a high level.
I don't disagree. I just think it's a fascinating concept that this Hall of Famer, it's been playing for 20 years. We know less about what he's going to give you in 2024 than the guy who's played a year and a half for the 49ers. Brock Purdy has been the exact same guy every day, unless it's raining.
Oh, yeah.
If it's raining, I'll take Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
I'm just straight up taking Brock Purdy over Jared Goff. I know Jared Goff has kind of turned things around. And in fact, I think the quote on Jared Goff from this article from one anonymous exec is that Jared Goff, quote, outplayed some of his critics, played well in big games. He used to seem nervous in the pocket. Now he seems cool out there. So that was the Jared Goff blurb.
For a season, I would have a hard time taking Brock over Goff.
Interesting. So you would have Goff over Stroud and Rodgers.
Goff played damn good.
He did.
I mean, he played very good. And almost like Brock, for the most part, outside of like just a terrible rookie year. And there was like a point where it got a little weird with the Rams. But he's kind of always been one of those guys that's like, he's kind of been the same. You know, especially once he kind of hit his little stride, like he's a good quarterback.
He's good. He's good. I'm taking Purdy over Goff. That's the one I have a little bit of a problem with. You're cool with Stafford? Stafford's 5 on here.
It feels a little high, but I mean, who am I going to put over him? Justin Herbert, who blew a 24-0 win in the and ended up losing a playoff game against the Jacksonville Jaguars.
And look, if we're talking playoffs, Purdy's been lights out. You know who hasn't? Is number 10 on the list, Dak Prescott.
Yeah. You know me, I hate that I defend Dak Prescott. I think I'd have Brock ahead of him, but I don't think it's the margin that people assume.
And look, there's a lot of good quarterbacks in the NFL right now. Every team's fan base is probably sitting here having the same podcast. Philadelphia Eagles fans, you know what they're saying about Jalen Hurts, right? And Trevor Lawrence wasn't in the top 10. And so Brock Purdy's not the only one that didn't make the top 10. There's a lot of good quarterbacks. So you could argue Purdy like 8. You could argue Purdy 15, probably. So I don't really have a big problem with that. I really don't have a big problem with him not making the top 10. If he continues to do what he does, I think all these things kind of take care of themselves. It's just Burrow was the number 1 pick in the draft. Purdy was the last pick in the draft. Purdy's just going to have to do it longer than Burrow has before people say, oh, you know what? Those guys are actually peers. And it's not like Burrow's up here and Purdy's down here.
I saw a comment about, someone saying, well, how is Dak Prescott, who was MVP runner-up, 10th on this list? So, dude, every fan base has an argument for their guy.
Right.
And, I think for Brock, and again, I don't know how exactly what these guys, how they're looking at ranking these guys, but if I had to guess, just looking at the list, it looks more so if there were a quarterback draft and you could plug and play any of these quarterbacks on any roster that you want, what order? You just come up with the best roster and what order of guys would you? Or maybe you don't know what roster you're getting. Maybe that's it too. Hey, I don't know what roster I'm getting. Who would I draft?
Right, and that's kind of the thing for me where it's like, man, Josh Allen does a lot by himself. I'm taking him over Burrow, and it's hard to say that. Oh man, you don't know what you're going to get. What would Brock Purdy look like if he'd have gotten drafted by a different football team and had different weapons around him and a different coach and a different offense? If he was asked to do the same thing in Buffalo that Josh Allen is, would we think the same way we do about Brock Purdy right now? And so that kind of skews things as well. And I think that's part of it for a lot of people and a lot of teams, because everyone we're talking about right now, Brock Purdy has less physical throwing ability than all those guys.
I always kind of just harp on this point, but the worst thing to ever happen for Brock Purdy was Jimmy Garoppolo go to the Raiders and get benched. Just in the way that people view him, the outsiders, the way that they view him, the worst thing for his perception, to ever happen, was Jimmy going and getting benched. Because a lot of these arguments that are going on for Brock, and again, I'm not saying Brock isn't better than Jimmy, but a lot of these arguments, the same kind of arguments were happening for Jimmy. Like how we're talking about how Brock is not top 10 on this list. And it's like, well, how isn't he top 10? And he's done this and he's done that. These were the same kind of arguments that were happening for Jimmy Garoppolo. And there were people that continued to push back on, he's not that, like, he has a perfect situation. His defense is number one. He has this guy and this guy. It was like the same. Like, he's not that great. Put him somewhere else and what's it going to look like? And we were like, man, what's it going to look like for Jimmy G? You get him away from the 49ers. What's it going to look like? I think he's still a good quarterback. We found out he couldn't even last half a season. So I'm not saying that would be the same thing with Brock. I feel like Brock has played better than Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yeah, clearly.
But because Jimmy played so well, and he did, like Jimmy played well. Again, he maybe had more kind of laps, right? Like he maybe had more of those moments where it was weird and it got a little weird. But I also think that he did have some very high moments. People like to they forget about it. I think they kind of do it. I don't know if they do it on purpose, but he had some high moments. He had games. I remember watching games, throwing for 400 yards and 4 touchdown passes and game-winning touchdowns. Like he did that. And he completed, 70% of his passes or whatever it was. And he did a lot. He was top 5 in a lot of categories. So again, he did all that in this offense with these weapons and really didn't even have CMC to lean on in the run game. But same philosophy. And then he goes somewhere else and he ends up getting benched. And I think that hurts how people view Brock Purdy. Even though, again, we can continue to we're blue in the face, say, no, Brock is better. Brock's played better than Jimmy G. And then like, well, yeah, but we saw what Jimmy did. And then we saw what he did when he went to Vegas. And he was trash. You got a whole TV show, Netflix Receivers, where Davante Adams is like beside himself trying to get away from Jimmy Garoppolo.
Dude, so first of all, because we didn't get a chance to talk about receivers, the show yet, my number one takeaway is that quarterbacks are more compelling than receivers. And it was almost like too wholesome. There was like, it's like, I like all these receivers. They're all like, they love their wives. And it's like, it's like it was like heartwarming with I liked everybody that was on the show. They were like, seemed like great dudes, worked hard. You kind of become a fan even more of all the players that were featured there. But the most compelling storylines were Kirk Cousins tearing his Achilles and Jimmy Garoppolo. Like the quarterbacks were still the most compelling storylines in the receivers show to me.
I think that they could have, and again, I like watching Kittle, but it's like I'm not really learning anything about him, or even Tebow, like, good family men and all that. But if we're talking about for TV purposes, the best storyline is Davante Adams and what he was going through in Oakland, like going from one quarterback, and it's like, how he ended up there, and then just the dynamic with Jimmy Garoppolo, and it's like, this dude's about to get me killed, get me out of here. I'm like, this is good TV. The other guys, it was just like, oh, okay, like, you get a nice little insight on things.
It was funny because Davante Adams at the beginning was stoked on Jimmy G. He's like, cool, Jimmy G, yeah, let's go, buddy. And then at the end, he's
because he saw what happened with the 49ers. It's like, they went to the Super Bowl and to the conference championship game. He completed 70%. He hears Debo and those guys go to bat for Jimmy G. Oh, he's a great leader. That's my guy. I'm going to bat for him any day. Love Jimmy Garoppolo. And then you get him. You're like, what the hell are these dudes like? What are they talking about? This is nothing like they said I was getting. He got the wish version of Jimmy Garoppolo.
Oh man. Yeah, you did feel bad for Davante Adams in that show for sure. All right, next, let's talk 49ers training camp battles at quarterback behind Brock Purdy, QB1. Next. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is sponsored by Gametime. And Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace in Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. And prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. Killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, panoramic views from your seat, by the way. You pull up the seat on your phone. You can look around as if you're actually sitting there, know exactly what it looks like in every direction. Lowest price guarantees, and Gametime takes all the guesswork out of buying tickets for not just Major League Baseball games, but NFL football games you've circled since that calendar release, since the schedule release. You want to go see an NFL game, you want to go see your San Francisco 49ers, find those tickets on Gametime. Concerts, comedy shows, theater events, all of it, and no hidden fees at checkout. So take the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
Hey, Peacock, I know we're supposed to be getting to these quarterback preview right now, but we'll get to that, y'all.
Yeah.
Real quick, one thing that kind of crossed my mind with the Davante Adams situation, because I think a lot of people are going to say he made his bed, he needs to lay in it. He forced his way out of Green Bay. That's it. Shouldn't have did that. You left a Hall of Fame quarterback, right? But it kind of draws parallels to the Brandon Ayuk situation and what it could potentially, like, the bad side of things. I just watched a video of Davante Adams talk about why and how he left Green Bay. He said, hey, we get this deal done right now. I'm good. I don't even care what happens with, this is him, like prior. He's saying, I don't even care what happens with Aaron Rodgers. If, I'll rock with Jordan Love, but just get my deal done and we're good. We ain't got nothing to worry about. And they offered him a deal. It was $17 million. And he's like, do y'all not know what these other guys around the league are making? Click, hung up on them. And now there's points like, man, get me out of here. And they got him out of there. And then you see the other side of it where it's like, dang, I went to the situation. Yeah, I got paid, but this is trash. And it is tough because all these people want to make what they feel like the value of them is. And that's Brandon Ayuk's whole argument, right? Man, y'all offer me this. You see what these other guys are getting? Click, they don't want me no more, right? But really it's, just either negotiation tactics or whatnot. But Davante Adams, it wasn't just send me to the Raiders to play with my buddy. It was get me out of this. Y'all don't want to pay me. Someone else will. Hey, maybe I can go play with my college buddy. Okay, they made it work where I could play with my college buddy. Then they got his college buddy out of there, and now you're playing with Jimmy G. Well, it's like, dang, maybe you shouldn't have went to the Raiders, but it ended up being terrible. But I think the path to him getting there is I feel like it aligns a little bit more with Brandon Ayuk's situation, where you have a good situation, they're offering you a certain amount. If you don't take it, it could end up like Adams. I think Ayuk would tell you, I'm willing to take that risk.
Well, that's the thing, is a lot of players that they want the money as if they're an unrestricted free agent before they're an unrestricted free agent. Like, they want the free agent money, but they want to stay in the cushy situation, the great situation they're in. And sometimes you got to be like, okay, I got to take a little less to stay now before something crazy happens. I don't break my leg or something this year. I get the security of a deal now in a place I like, and I don't get the maximum dollars. And if you want the maximum dollars, you can go chase that. But that can turn out like we've seen with Davante Adams. It's like, have fun in Carolina, Brandon Ayuk. You know what I mean? It might not turn out all that great for you. It's good. There's some lessons to be learned there for sure. By the way, real quick on your last point about Jimmy G, I ran across this stat earlier, and it's a perfect time for it. Quarterback leaders yards per attempt from 2018 to 2023. Do you know who number one is in the NFL in that time?
Brock Purdy?
Brock Purdy, 9.2 is number one. Do you know who number two is?
Jimmy Garoppolo.
Jimmy Garoppolo, 8.2. A full yard, by the way. Like, Brock's way out in front in yards per attempt. Do you know who number three is?
Stroud?
No.
Jordan Love?
Nick Mullins.
So again, that's the tough part. I hope people get to this, the 28-minute mark in the show. That is the tough argument when it comes to Brock Purdy and how people view him. It's extremely difficult for outsiders to be like, oh yeah, he's this great quarterback. But then you look at his list and it's like, well, the top three guys are all Kyle Shanahan quarterbacks.
Mm-hmm. And then Deshaun Watson actually is tied for third with Nick Mullins, and number 5 is Patrick Mahomes, 7.9.
Yeah. That's tough. That's what's tough for Brock.
Tanner Mordecai, a 6-year college player, undrafted free agent by the 49ers, 6'1" and 5/8, 210 pounds, ran a 4.53. He's got a good arm too, Croc. Does Tanner Mordecai. Played his final college season in 2023 at Wisconsin. He's been in college since 2018. He was a pretty big recruit, went to Oklahoma for 3 years, didn't play a lot, then had 2 years as a starting quarterback at SMU before transferring and having his final season in 2023 at Wisconsin. By the way, Danny Gray's former college quarterback at SMU in 2021 was Tanner Mordecai. And, put up some okay numbers. Didn't really light the world on fire, even when he was a starter in college. Probably had his best season with Danny Gray, 39 touchdowns to 12 interceptions, 67.8% passing, 3,600 passing yards. That was his best year in 2021. But Tanner Mordecai's got some ability and potentially, like, if you're talking about speed and arm strength, maybe the most ability on the team for the San Francisco 49ers, as far as just, tested ability, tangible, arm size. None of the 49ers quarterbacks are very big. Can he unseat Brandon Allen and Joshua Dobbs? And do you see Joshua Dobbs, Croc, as the quarterback that comes in as the unquestioned number 2? Because that's how people are treating him. I don't know if that's necessarily the case.
I think the 49ers, if you ask them, is like, hey, man, we're more than comfortable with having a guy like Dobbs behind Brock Purdy. He's smart. He can move. There are things you can do with him. He's been in multiple different schemes. We've watched him pick up a scheme really quick. We also have seen how the longer he plays, the more you realize why he's a backup. But if you have Brock Purdy go down for a game or two, and out of those quarterbacks, who would you like to fill in right now? I think without a doubt, it would be Joshua Dobbs. Now, I think we've seen the 49ers' willingness to kind of pivot if they like a guy, and they paid money to Nate Sudfeld. And everybody just assumed it's Lance, it's Jimmy, it's Nate Sudfeld, like those are the guys. And they liked something enough in Brock Purdy, and I think now we know exactly what they liked, but they liked the stuff that he had enough to say, hey, we gave Nate Sudfeld guaranteed money. Wasn't anything crazy, but for a third-string quarterback, $2 million guaranteed. That's enough to keep your guy around, you would assume. Like, no, we really like what this other guy gave us. So, I think for Tanner Mordecai, it's listening back to any time Kyle Shanahan or John Lynch talked about Brock Purdy in his time as a rookie in training camp, how he maximized his opportunity, how even if he got 4 reps, he just did what he was supposed to do with those reps. If he had, 2 throws out of those 4 reps, he made sure those 2 throws were what Kyle Shanahan was looking for. And you go, Tanner Mordecai, you go and you mimic everything that he did. And that will give you your best opportunity to, maybe you don't pass up Dobbs right now, but you definitely can pass up Brandon Allen.
I don't think I would be shocked, really. I think there is a pretty solid competition for number 2 between Dobbs and Allen, and Kyle Shanahan's been pretty glowing about Brandon Allen and brought him in for a reason. He's been around for a couple of years now, knows the system really well. We know how smart Josh Dobbs is and should be able to pick up on that system, but nobody's really gone to bat for Josh Dobbs in his career to hold on to him for very long. All of his stops were really short. It's like, okay, cool, little stopgap, but we're okay with him not being here too. And so that's interesting to me. I think there's a battle there. But if Dobbs is clearly the number 2, then, and you don't want to lose your guy, Mordecai, and he looks good in the preseason, I could see him keeping Mordecai and the undrafted guy is the number 3 and cutting Brandon Allen. I could also see Mordecai, and the most likely is that he ends up on the practice squad, and maybe even they still keep 2 quarterbacks. So I think it's a pretty important competition for that number 2 job, because the number 3 guy could be gone. Even if they do put Mordecai on the practice squad, potentially they could save an extra spot if they like him enough to be the number 3 quarterback and bring him up if somebody else gets hurt, and keep only 2 quarterbacks. So I think it's a pretty important battle between Dobbs and Allen to be that backup. And obviously it's important because they're one play away from being the starting quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers. And their actions in the offseason, Croc, the 49ers, tell me that they've had some time and they are okay now, and there's no more PTSD about the injury stuff, and they're not too worried about how much a backup might have to play, because they didn't really do anything. They didn't do anything aggressively at all to address backup quarterback. So that tells me they're fine with the guys they have, and they're not worried about the health of their starting quarterback anymore.
And I think that's not just for them, but I'd say for the fan base as well. Going through the PTSD of Jimmy Garoppolo and the injuries that he sustained. I mean, for how much football he played with the 49ers, he only had like 2 full seasons. So, that in itself, tough. And then you have the Trey Lance situation. And then Jimmy Garoppolo goes down again. And then you have Brock, who goes down in the conference championship game. So I think, watching Brock play last year, got a little banged up in the middle of the year there dealing with the concussions. But outside of that, I think everybody can like kind of take a deep breath and say, you know what, you don't have to have this crazy backup quarterback. I think we can now, hopefully, and knock on wood here, trust Brock Purdy to be able to play through a season and just have a serviceable backup. And like I said, 1 or 2 games, I trust Dobbs. Anything more than that, it starts to get a little weird.
It's a good reminder. Now's a good time to go place those MVP bets for Brock Purdy for the 2024 season as well. All right. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We appreciate you out there tuning in every single day to Locked On 49ers. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Croc and I back tomorrow. Locked On 49ers.